Imagine any game of Warhammer, and what probably springs immediately to mind is a beautiful game board decorated with terrain. Be it natural features or ruined sci-fi buildings, terrain is the beating heart of any good game, immediately setting a scene and adding drama. It's really fun to make your own terrain, of course, but if you don't have the time or materials, shop-bought terrain is a really easy and convenient way to fill up your battlefield. I found this Hornby Lichgate from a church in a charity shop for just a couple of pounds this weekend, and it's perfectly usable straight out of the box, just put it on the table, done. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to paint it up in a slightly more detailed style, using the existing colours as base coats, punched up with some washes and dry brushing. In this video, I'm just going to show you a really simple way to turn out-of-the-box terrain into something a bit more exciting on the tabletop. I'm going to start with the stone, for which we need 4 colours, and specifically these 4. We'll need them all at the same time, so put a big dollop of them all on your palette. I'm then going to begin by washing all of the stone with Athonian Camoshade. You can be quite heavy and generous here, we want the wash to stay wet for as long as possible. Because, whilst it's still wet, I'm going to take the other 3 colours in turn, and randomly apply splodges of them across the surface. This is going to add some tonal variation and visual interest, and make the weathering look more natural. You don't need to clean your brush between each paint, as we want them to mix and meld into one another. It will look quite stark now, but as the paint dries, the effect will become a lot more subtle. Whilst the stone is still wet, I'm going to turn my attention to the wooden parts of the Lichgate. I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Wyldwood and Contrast Medium, just to thin it down slightly, and apply this all over the wood. Don't worry if you get any of this on the tiles, as we're going to repaint these in a minute, but also don't worry if you get any on the stones, as it will just add to the shading and weathering. Just work your way around all the wooden areas like so, getting the Wyldwood into the nooks and crannies. Give this all a good while to dry, at least half an hour. Something you can do whilst this is still wet, to help create the effect of years of build-up of moss and rain, is to paint some patches of Athonian Camoshade onto the wood, and let it blend into the Wyldwood, like how we did for the stone. It's quite freeing to be able to paint in quite a messy way without fear of mistakes. This represents a real building, it's sat in rain and mud for centuries, so it's going to be dirty. You can also see here in real time, as the paint is drying, that the stone is beginning to look a little bit more subtle, like I said. Once this is dry, you can see what a difference the washes have made. Our next step is to begin dry brushing, to pick out all the raised details. For the stone, we're going to start with a light dry brush of grey cere. You can see how this is keeping the coloured undertones, whilst picking out the raised detail. This is quite a light dry brush, it's better to build up several thin layers of dry brushing until you reach a level of highlighting you're happy with, rather than going too heavily off the bat. Next, if you want the stone even brighter, you can apply an even lighter dry brush of Athonian Grey in exactly the same way. The reason for doing successive lighter colours is that the Athonian Grey will apply a bit better over a darker grey dry brush than it would if I did this first. It's effectively a dry brush base coat. You can see here how the really subtle red, brown and green tones have remained, but the dry brushing has just brought back out some of the detail. I'm going to do something very similar for the wood, starting with a dry brush of Steel Legion Drab to begin picking back out the grain detail. You can see I'm going against the grain, rather than up and down in the same direction as the wood grain. Next, now that we've got that base dry brush applied, I'm going to do a lighter coat with Karak Stone. You can see how the detail is becoming even more pronounced with this second colour. And finally, and entirely optionally, a very light dry brush of Wraithbone to emphasise the very edges of the wood. And with that done, the wood is complete. All that's left now is the tiling. The original model has this sort of slate grey roof, but in order to better contrast with the wood and stone, I'm going to make the roof terracotta. I'm going to begin by base coating the tiles with Skrag Brown. You may need more than one coat for an even finish, but just keep the paint thin and wait for each layer to dry before applying the next. And of course be careful not to overspill onto the wood you've just painted. Once you're happy with the coverage, we have this lovely rich terracotta colour. To shade the tiles, I'm going to apply Fireslayer Flesh contrast, painting a good layer all over the tiles and letting it settle into all the nooks and crannies. Again, give this a good half hour to dry. With that done, you can see how this has really brought out the detail on the tiles. I'm now going to highlight the tiles back up, beginning with a dry brush of Balor Brown. You can see I'm turning the model this way so that the brush catches the raised detail on the underside of the tiles. Turning the model like this lets it work for you. I'm being quite vigorous with this first dry brush layer. And then a very light dry brush of Dorn Yellow, just to emphasise the colour and establish the edges. This is quite a punchy step up in brightness, so be really sparing here. And now all that's left are optional finishing touches. For example, if you feel like the bottom can be a little mossier, you can take some Athonian Camoshade, thin down with Lahmian Medium to a glaze consistency, and just add some green tones to the base of the stones there. You can also do the same to the tiles, pulling it downwards to simulate rainfall. Just go around and apply this anywhere you want a little more shading. Another optional touch, if you have any modelling tufts, is to apply a few around the model to simulate mosses and lichens that might have grown on the building. My advice is to be quite sparing, and think about where such plants might naturally thrive, in nooks and sheltered areas, rather than out in the open or sticking straight out of the wall. Once you've applied as many as you want, the gate is finished. And there we go, the repainted Lich Gate. I'll put a side-by-side comparison here of the before and after, so you can compare. You can see what a difference some simple techniques can make, just dry brushing and washes, turning something store-bought into something a bit more interesting and a bit more visually in keeping with your battlefield. I hope you enjoyed this, and you feel inspired to spruce up any terrain you might have lying around the house. If you did enjoy the video, please do like and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow, and perhaps leave a comment if there's something you learned or something you'd like to see me try next time. Either way, I'll see you next time, and until then, happy painting.